if you're always going after the other person, if you're always the pursuer, etc., they start to take you for granted, right? You're always the one calling and texting. You're in their face constantly, thinking that that's the way to make them love you. You're also creating that they take you for granted. They think you're so familiar that they have you wrapped around your finger a little bit. And unconsciously, they lose a bit of respect. They may not say it, but it'll come out in their behavior. And over time, the spell of love will kind of diminish. So you want to step back, you want to create some distance, some absence, and you want to make them come to you instead of you going to them. The main protection you need in life is to recognize the type of people who are manipulators before you get involved with them. So people who are malignant narcissists, for instance, and the game of people who are malignant narcissists is to infect your emotions, to gain control over your emotions, to create all kinds of drama where they're making you react, they're making you upset, and they're in complete control of that. Okay? So that's like one of the worst forms of manipulators that are out there. But once you get involved with someone like that, the way you can recognize that you're being manipulated is by the emotional reactions people are churning up that you cannot control. They're making you angry. They're making you upset. They're making you excited. And then that excitement changes into fear, into insecurity. You feel constantly emotional, like you're being played, right? But you don't realize it sometimes in the moment because when we get emotional, we don't think very well. We're not being very rational. So you can recognize it when people, by your reactions, by how emotional you are and how it's constantly shifting. The problem is that by the time you realize that, it's almost too late because you're so upset, you're so entangled in their power games that it's very hard to get yourself out of it. So the best defense in this world is to recognize the manipulators before you get involved with them. First of all, you notice that they have a track record, that they've manipulated other people, that they have a lot of enemies in this world, right? If they have a lot of enemies in this world, that must mean something, okay? But you also are attuned to their body language, to the nonverbal communication cues that people give. When people look at you, their eyes reveal a lot. Their eyes reveal that they're actually interested, they're actually engaging. Manipulators have this kind of distance in their eyes, as if they're thinking, as you can hear them thinking. They're not like looking at you. They're kind of going, wow, what can I say to get this person interested in me? The eyes reveal a lot about whether people are outwardly focused or inwardly focused. And be very attuned to the body language, to what seems authentic and what is fake. I mean, these are some cues, but the most important thing is to be aware of your emotions and how you're being played and how they're constantly shifting because of all the drama that this person is stirring up.
That's very useful. And those are some really great signs to look out for. And I always think about it as a roller coaster. Sorry?
Have you ever dealt with someone who's a great manipulator?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Great social manipulator. It was a woman. It was a girl, actually. She was quite young, but she had this, since she was a baby, she had this ability. I think it was just narcissism, to be honest. And I don't use that term lightly. I don't like throwing it around, but I think she was actually, if there's one person in the world, she was definitely diagnosed with narcissism. And, she could just take you on this roller coaster of emotions, from like hate to love to excitement to fear, everything you mentioned. And she could really control the group dynamic. So if she wanted someone excluded, she would make everyone else turn against the other person. And no one in the group actually liked her, but they were all kind of scared of her. And it wasn't like this was the boss or someone who had real power over other people, but the way she could manipulate people, honestly, it was impressive. Didn't
Yeah,
like her at all, but it was impressive. I was like, wow, this is crazy. So yeah, there's
it
definitely people
it is.
like that. And
Yeah, it's
yeah, it's
amazing, as you
it's
say, what one person can do and how they can completely disrupt and dominate a group dynamic. And you
absolutely.
wonder, what is it about them, and what is that skill, or what are they doing that gives them that power? It's a fascinating subject. Why don't you like using the word narcissist?
I just think people nowadays throw it around.
Overused? Yeah.
Overuse. Everyone's a narcissist. My mom's a narcissist. My dad's a narcissist. My boyfriend's a narcissist, because they did one thing. And I think we're all narcissists to a degree or
Well,
another. I think
that's
it's
what.
it's a spectrum. And then,
Yeah,
the
that's.
people that are actually diagnosed with it, I think it was like 1 or 2% of the population, whereas everyone thinks everyone's a narcissist. So, I think there's a difference. Like, sure, you can have narcissistic qualities or behaviors, so you can be more narcissistic, and then you can be more selfless in not in different contexts. But yeah, I just don't like to throw that term around, as
Yeah.
easily as most people do.
Well, yeah.
Would you
In
agree?
the laws of human nature. Yes, I do agree. In the laws of human nature, I have a chapter on narcissism, and I say that we are all narcissists. We are all self-absorbed by our nature as human animals in the 21st century. It's unavoidable that we think first and foremost of ourselves, that we're more interested in our own ideas than other people's ideas. You know, it's natural and it's normal. But what happens is that you have people who are somewhat healthy with their narcissism, they're aware of it, and they have a degree of self-love and self-respect, so that when bad things happen to them, and they start feeling depressed and low, they're able to raise themselves back up because they have a degree of self-love. So self-love is not a bad thing. It's actually a very good and powerful thing. And what happens with terrible narcissists, the 1%, I would say, to me, I think it's more like 5%, but who knows? It's just a number.
You're probably
Is
right.
when bad things happen, and they start feeling upset and insecure, they don't have that self-love to raise them back up. The only way that they can feel okay about it is to start hurting other people, to start creating drama and getting attention. Instead of an internal voice that goes, "You're not so bad. Let's just wait it out. Things will get better." They go, "I'm so desperate. I'm so upset. I'm so angry. I have to get attention. I have to get other people. I have to manipulate other people." They cannot raise themselves back up. So to have some love for yourself, to have some self-esteem, is actually a very good and positive and powerful thing.
Absolutely. And I think that's an amazing way to differentiate people who are actually narcissistic, diagnosed, and then people who are just, normal and are just on the spectrum, narcissistic spectrum. And
Yeah, yeah. I think spectrum is a good word for it. Yeah,
mm, and you mentioned seduction, and you said also
yeah.
that manipulation is kind of part of it. I was wondering, what is seduction?
Well, seduction is a form of power. So, you know, people have a weakness in life, okay? And the weakness that we all have, myself included, everybody on this planet, is that we don't have enough pleasure, okay? We don't have enough fun. We don't have enough excitement. We don't have enough theater and drama and things that raise us out of the banalities of everyday life. We're hungry for that, right? We have to work. We have to handle all the business things in our life. Life can be really drudgery and difficult and painful. And so that weakness is the fact that we want pleasure. We want to get out of our day-to-day world. We want to get out of the banalities that are weighing us down. So along comes a person, a man or a woman, or an animal, because animals seduce. And they say, all right, I'm going to give this person a taste of some pleasure, a taste of some thrill, a taste of some excitement. It could be sexual, but doesn't have to be sexual. It could be an adventure. You know, men are very much seduced by women who are offering an adventure because they like the thrill of the hunt. They like to chase. They like anything that has a little bit of danger involved. Okay. So what you're offering is something that people don't normally get in their day-to-day life. If you're a man or a woman and you know how to give people a taste of that pleasure and get them eating out of your hand and running after you, you are a master seducer or seductress. That is the art. It is knowing people's weakness and need to be taken out of their boring day-to-day life and playing on that to seduce them, to make them fall in love, to make them vote for you in an election, to sell them a product in marketing, whatever it is. It's all the same psychology.
So seduction is not just in the romantic context. It could be in any kind of context.
Of course. I mean, to win an election these days as a politician, you have to be really good at media, right? It's a new phenomenon. It wasn't necessarily like that 200 years ago. You have to, it's not that you're not just a good speaker, but you're good on television, you're good on social media, you're good, in any kind of image orientation, right? So you have to be a seducer. You have to know that voters are missing something. Usually in an election, what that is people want change. They're bored and they're tired with the same Labor Party, Republicans, Democrats. I want change. I want things different. You know how to appeal to that. You're a seducer. You're giving them something that they don't have. In marketing, you're figuring out audiences are so inundated with this particular approach. Here's a new approach that's going to get their attention, right? And make them excited. That's seduction. Okay? You're working in an office and you don't want to be sexually seducing people in your office, hopefully. Okay? But you know that people want to be liked. They want respect. They want validation. You want to feel that your ideas are great ideas. Well, that's what that person does in the work office. It's called a charmer. That's one of the types of seducers. They know how to make you feel great about yourself. That's a seduction. Social, political, sexual, marketing, it's all the same.
Very interesting. So besides the charmer, what are the other archetypes of seduction?
Well, starting at the beginning, there's the siren. So I maintain in the art of seduction that it is women that invented the art of seduction, and the most ancient archetypes of seduction are women. And the siren is the preeminent female seductress. And it has a very physical component to it. A siren has a very powerful sexual energy that isn't obvious. It's not like they go around naked or anything, but it's in their aura. I often, when I'm watching a movie and I'm looking at actresses, I can feel it in them. I don't know what it is exactly, but I know one of the archetypes that I talk about is Marilyn Monroe. And Marilyn Monroe would literally make love to the camera. She wanted you to love her, right? And so she was so vulnerable and so open. And that gave her that kind of siren presence. But it's a sort of physical quality that only really a man can appreciate, because the siren is a powerful seductress of men. A man feels that energy in the woman and is really drawn to it. Also, sirens are very theatrical. They create a lot of drama. They create fantasy. Like Cleopatra was creating incredible fantasies. So that's the siren. On the flip side is the male seducer, because all the other types can be male or female, but these two types are generally one or the other, is the rake. That's the most primal, powerful form of male seduction, is the rake. And the rake is a man who really understands and really likes women. He's very interested in women. He was probably had sisters, and had a strong mother, and he was around women. He likes them, he appreciates them, he understands their psychology, their needs. The thing is, he's never satisfied by one woman. It's after a couple of months, he's on to somebody else, okay? But in those 2 months that a rake is interested in you, no woman can resist him because he fills you with so much attention that's so focused on you. And it's not like creepy attention. It's not like a stalking attention. It's loving, romantic attention that you don't get from any other man, because men are so interested in their work and their business. They don't care about women's things. This man is all focused on you. He understands you. He's giving you what you want. No woman can resist it. And men who are rakes are also very good with words, because words are the woman's weakness. A man who can speak well, who can weave stories and poetic things with his tongue is extremely seductive, right? For men, it's appearances, it's visuals, it's that sexual energy. For women, a lot of it revolves around words and ideas and thoughts and concepts and fantasies that a man can evoke. That is the rake, right? No man can resist a siren, and no woman can resist a true rake. The other types are like the dandy, which is a type of man or woman who has qualities of the opposite sex, the other gender. So it's a man with a touch of femininity. It's a woman with a touch of masculinity. And believe it or not, that has very, very powerful sexual and social appeal to people. I could go into why that is, but that's a very powerful type. There is the natural, which is somebody who has a very childlike ability. They're spontaneous. They may be in their 20s, but you have the feeling that they're 5 years old. They're so real and natural and spontaneous and kind of helpless and vulnerable. You go, wow, that's lovable. I want to, I want that person. There's the coquette, which traditionally is a woman, but can be a man, is the one who plays hot and cold. They're suddenly so excited about you. Their eyes will go, wow, there's something going on there. And then the next minute they're all cold and distant, and they've completely wrapped you around your finger by this pattern of coldness and hotness. There are a few others, but I don't want to exhaust the list. That gives you an idea.
Super interesting. Yeah, thank you so much for
the whole list.
No, that was good enough. And yeah, I think, but those are kind of most of them, right? So that was really, really.
There's like 5 or 6 of the 9. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And for someone who's listening right now and they're thinking, this sounds amazing, but they don't necessarily feel seductive, or they don't feel like they have any of those qualities, or they don't feel like they're attracting someone. Is there a way for someone to cultivate this magnetic, seductive aura?
Yeah.
How do they do it?
It's very simple. I mean, there are many different ways to get there, but there's one path that is the most powerful of all. And that is to be more interested in other people. So what makes you unseductive, what I call anti-seductive, is that you're so self-absorbed. You're only thinking about yourself. You're insecure. You're worried about what people think about you. You're constantly going, am I saying the right things to this woman in the bar? Is she bored? You're so wrapped up in your own thoughts that you're not paying attention. The ability to get outside of yourself, and you can practice this. The problem nowadays is everything is virtual. You're swiping to find somebody. You need to practice this on people in the world and not virtually, okay? And the practice is this: thinking about them. So if I were interested in you, Francesca, right now, just as a scenario, right? And I was trying to seduce you, okay? And we were in a restaurant or a bar, I'd be focusing on who you are, what your world is like. I would be asking questions that aren't obvious, but that show that I'm interested in your world, how you think, what's going on with you, what was your childhood like? I get you to talk about yourself. People never feel like they're the star of the show. They never feel like they get to talk about themselves. You get the other person to talk because you're focused on them. You're not focused on yourself, right? I'm interested in you. I'm interested in what makes Francesca tick. What were her horrible experiences with boyfriends in the past and why? I'm trying to get inside of your world and think like you think so I can understand what it is that you're missing in life. Okay? What makes people bad at the game is they can't get inside of other people. They're so locked in their heads. They're can only think about what they need, what they want, what they think is funny or what they think is interesting. But you have to think of what the other person finds interesting. I have this famous quote that I'm going to mangle terribly in The Art of Seduction, where in England in the 19th century, there were these two political rivals, Benjamin Disraeli, who was a great prime minister, and this other man, I can't remember what his name was, Goldsmith, maybe, Gold something or other. Sorry. And Disraeli was the master seducer, and this woman, this princess or whatever, was at a party, an evening with them, and she said, sitting next to Mr. Goldsmith, whatever his name was, I thought he was the most interesting man in the world. Sitting next to Mr. Disraeli, I thought I was the most interesting person in the world. That is what charm, that is what seduction is. So you're not trying to impress people with how brilliant you are. You're trying to make them feel brilliant. You're trying to make them feel wonderful and great, not you. Get out of yourself, get out of your world, get out of your own problems and get inside other people, inside their minds, ask questions. And then, this is a very brilliant seduction technique. When somebody says something that seems kind of interesting or telling, the next day or later that evening, you come back to them and you quote what they were saying in some context. What this reveals is that you were listening to them, that you've retained something that they said that was very personal, and you've quoted it back to them, not in an obvious way, but it reveals indirectly that you were truly listening to them. Man, that is powerful because people don't listen to each other anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes total sense. And I think a lot of women are complaining about that. They're going on dates and they feel like the guy hasn't asked them any questions or they only talked about themselves. And, it seems like a simple ask, like, please just ask me some questions, but you'd be surprised how little it actually happens.
Well, that's men's weakness when it comes to seduction. They talk too much about themselves. It's a terrible quality.
Are there you mentioned some anti-seductive qualities. Are there other habits that maybe people are doing unconsciously that are anti-seductive?
Well, one quality is moralizing and judging, and always judging other people and judging them for what they said and judging them for what they look and judging from the clothes that they wear and judging them for their friends and their political opinions. That is completely unseductive. Being moralizing and superior, that will put anybody off, okay? Being so insecure that you're always worried about what you're going to say and whether you're pleasing people, we can read that kind of insecurity on people. It's very anti-seductive, insecurity. The lack of generosity. So, if you're a man, I'm being very traditional here, so I don't know, it's probably not very good for the 21st century. But pay the money, pick up the bill. Don't be tight. Don't be such a tightwad. Don't be having always to split the bill. Pay for things. Give generous gifts. But not just material things. Be generous with your attention, right? So you're somebody that's always involved in your business and your work and you have no time for your partner or the person you're trying to seduce. Do the opposite and be generous with the time that you give them. If the woman, for instance, if it's a man or woman, the woman knows that you're very busy, okay? But if suddenly you take off a complete day and you say, let's just go off and do our things and let's just be together for that whole day, that's powerful. You're being generous with your spirit. You're being generous with your time. That is, lack of that is a very anti-seductive quality. Those are some of them. Once again, I could go
Yeah.
through all 10, but I'm just going to leave it at that for now.
Yeah, I think those are
It's a fun
so
subject,
spot
though.
on. Yeah, absolutely. And I can so much resonate
I
with
mean,
that. And
the one I left out, what I kind of mentioned, is the talker, the big talker, the person that's always bragging and saying, God, I was so great, and look at all the wonderful things I've done, and all the people that have been interested in me, and all the things I've accomplished, and how many books I've written, and how fantastic, and how many followers I have on Instagram. Man, that is really anti-seductive.
yeah, absolutely. And also, you mentioning generosity, I think it applies to both
Yeah,
men and women.
sure.
Even if you, for instance, I remember going out with this like girl, just like as friends, and I think it was like we met at the book club and then we went for a coffee, and at the end she picked up the bill and like she paid for it, and I was like, wow, that had never happened to me before with a woman, like a friend has never really paid for my coffee before, and I really appreciated that. It really made me like her more. And then the other example is, I don't know what it is about the UK, but on birthdays, people don't bring you gifts. Whereas where I'm from, which is Romania, people always bring you thoughtful, really
Romania.
nice gifts, and they
Romania,
pay for
yeah.
things and they invest money and time. And then it was such a shock to see, I made some British friends and they came to my birthday and they came empty handed. And I had to adjust to this culture.
When is
but
your birthday, Francesca?
it's on the 28th of March.
20th of March?
28th.
20th, 28th of March.
Yeah.
Okay, I have friends with that. So you're an Aries.
Yes, I'm an Aries.
Yeah.
How about you? When's your birthday?
May 14.
So are you
Taurus.
a Taurus? Yeah. Oh, very cool. So yeah, I think,
well, yes.
it really puts you off when people aren't being generous.
On the subject of gifts are a very important topic in the art of seduction. And what you must understand is the power of a gift isn't necessarily in the money that you've spent on it. It's in the thoughtfulness of it. And the thoughtfulness is you're giving them something that appeals to them as an individual. This is the other thing about seduction that you need to understand. Back in the early 2000s, we had this big thing about the pickup artist, right? Particularly in Los Angeles, the game, playing the game. Men knew all these techniques for how to seduce women. The problem was that it wasn't geared towards a woman who, as an individual, her specific needs. It was just this kind of general strategies that you applied. And women could see through it. It was very off-putting. So you're dealing with people as an individual. You, Francesca, have your own needs, your own interests, your own peculiar tastes. If I give you a gift that shows I understand who you are as an individual, I give you some music that I know is your taste, or I give you not just flowers, not just the general cliched stuff, but something that shows that I was listening to you, that I understand you, that the gift is personal. It's not just that it was expensive, but that there was some thinking going on in it. That is the more seductive, powerful way to give a gift.
Absolutely. And women really appreciate that. Probably men as well, but I'd say particularly women.
Men do too.
Very interesting. And the other thing I wanted to ask you, you mentioned charm and charisma. Are charisma and seduction the same thing, or are they different?
Well, one of the types of seducers that I did not mention was the charismatic. So it's definitely a form of seduction. And the idea is, backing up a little bit here, seduction and the art of seduction is a language. It's a language that you are learning. It's not a language of words. It's a language of actions. It's a language of your body, of how you present yourself. It's how you dress, how you look, how you smell. It's a pre-verbal language that you have to learn. It's about giving gifts. It's about where you take people, okay? So we humans are very attuned to people's nonverbal communication, to their body language. We pick it up. It's the animal part of ourselves, right? And it's very powerful and it's very seductive, okay? So a charismatic has very, very, very powerful body language. And what is that? They believe something so strongly. They're so certain about something powerful about their world or what they want that it radiates to them. It's like there's a light bulb inside of them that you can't see, but that animates all their gestures, their eyes, their mouth, their expression. They seem alive. It's almost a slight sexual energy, but it's this energy of self-belief, of confidence, of wanting people to like them, right? This is the kind of power that a Marilyn Monroe had before the camera. And it's extremely powerful. You can read it in people, right? So it's very important for a political figure or an actor or somebody in the public eye to have that quality, right? And it can't be faked. That's the thing about it. The thing that's interesting about people with charisma that I discovered in my research is that they generally come from troubled, bad backgrounds. They had bad childhoods. They were abused. They were neglected. They were abandoned, right? And what happens in that scenario is they didn't get the love and attention that they needed from their parents, from their early caregivers, right? And so they need to get that love and attention from the public. That is how they get their sense of validation and love, not from mommy and daddy, but from a whole country, from an entire audience. You know, Winston Churchill had tremendous charisma, but it only came about during World War II in a time of crisis. But Winston Churchill came from was very much neglected as a child. John F. Kennedy, who had tremendous charisma. His father was extremely cruel and mean to him. Marilyn Monroe was basically raised in an orphanage. She never knew her parents. These types of people feel a tremendous need to get what they want from the public, from a large public, and we can feel it in them non-verbally. It comes out in their face, in their manner, and these are elements in charisma.
That's so interesting how childhood trauma can make you super charismatic. What other ways, in what other ways does your childhood affect you when it comes to seduction or who you are attracted to?
Well, whole books could be written about that. You know, a lot of it is, so when we were very young, 1 or 2 years old, I mean, for boys, the mother figure had a very important impact on them, right? So it's different for girls because your early years are with somebody of your own gender, because generally, we're generalizing, but it's changing now, but women were more involved in the first 2 or 3 years of a child. It's not changing that much. It's still pretty much the same. So for a man, the impact of his mother on who he's attracted to is incredibly powerful, right? So, Carl Jung, the psychologist, you're probably familiar with him, right? He had this concept of the anima and the animus. And the anima is an image that a man carries in him of this kind of ideal woman. And it'll be a woman that will appear in his dreams. She's usually a little bit elusive. She's often maybe a little bit crazy or something, right? But it's a quality that's embedded in him from his mother, from that mother image that is deep, 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 deep down in his psyche. And so later in life, he will be interested, attracted to women who don't consciously conjure up the image of his mother. Unconsciously they do, in mannerisms, in certain vocal patterns, in the sound of their voice, in the fact that they have a nurturing quality or their lack of nurturing quality. But something about that mother figure is reflected there. Now women, on the other side, Jung called it the animus, and it's kind of the male, the masculine image in your head. And so the thing about the anima for men is that it's the woman part of their personality that is attracted to a woman. I know this sounds strange, but it's actually very interesting, and I've written about it. For women, it's the masculine part of inside of them, and it's that male voice that they've internalized from their father. And so that father figure, if he's abusive and negative and not loving, it still has a deep, deep, deep impact on their choices later on in life. It'll be, they don't want that type of man, okay? But that they don't want that type of the father, but the father is influencing that choice. Or there's a quality in that particular powerful figure that they were very much attracted to, and they're still striving for later in life. And then siblings have a very powerful impact on the choices that we have. Particularly if you're a man who has sisters or a girl who has brothers, those sisters and brothers get inside. Your early years, you were like a sponge and you were absorbing people's energy, right? And it had a tremendous impact on you. You're not even aware of it. And so those siblings that you had, I had a sister who was 4 years older than me, had a very powerful impact on my mind and my interests in things. So the siblings and the parents have a very, very powerful effect on who we choose as partners later in life.
Absolutely. And that makes a lot of sense. I don't think it's strange at all. I can absolutely see it around me and how people make these unconscious choices. I think that's why it's important not to take things personally, because the woman might be like, I gave him everything. I was so affectionate. And, maybe his mom was not affectionate and that's what he was attracted to. And that's why he didn't choose you. So, it's not personal a lot of the times.
Well, that's a very good thing that you bring up, because it's important to not take anything personally in the game of seduction. So a lot of men, when you feel rejected by a woman, you get very angry and upset and kind of bitter, and you carry it with you, around with you. And the whole thing is, in seduction, you need to have a light touch. So if somebody rejected you, fine, I'm on to the next one. There are other women out there. There are other fish in the ocean. I learned something. I learned that I made a mistake. I learned that I'm not attractive to everyone. Fine, on to the next one. Don't take things personally and don't get so heavy. Seduction is a realm of lightness.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people need to really integrate that advice, because rejection is quite hard, especially in today's world. And that was kind of like my next question is, how has seduction and love, how did they change in the modern world?
Well, I don't know if I'm the best person qualified to answer that, since I am, I'm in my 60s. So I'd hate to say that, but it's true. So I grew up in a different world, and I know that world very well. I don't know what it's like to be, in your 20s right now. I have no real access to that, but I know that it's much more difficult. So in my day and age, you only met a woman, or if you're gay, we've been very heterosexual here, but it applies to all persuasions. To meet somebody, you had to go out physically and do it, right? And it took for a man, this took a lot of kind of guts to go up and talk to somebody that you didn't know. It was almost kind of frightening. Then you got used to it, maybe you got more comfortable and you got better at it and you had more interactions, and it became easier and easier and easier. But it was you had to go through this barrier where to meet somebody, we're in there with them face to face, in a bar, in a restaurant, in a club, in any kind of setting. And you had to overcome that fear of rejection or your timidity. And it was not easy, right? And it developed a skill. And women had something similar. They had to deal with men directly. And that meant sometimes men were kind of frightening and kind of, too much, came on too strong. But you had to deal with that. You had to understand how to negotiate that kind of situation where a man is continually after you. That's like a social skill that you have to learn, how to handle these interactions. And now when it's you're not having that. Okay, yes, you swiped here and you're going out and you're meeting that person, right? But there's already some interest there involved. You didn't have to go up and make that first bold kind of step or deal with that person coming after you in a bar or whatever. And so something social is missing. A skill is missing in your skill set, right? And so it's a problem. And also, the other thing I would say is to fall in love with somebody requires opening yourself up and being vulnerable, and the possibility of being rejected, the possibility of pain, of a breakup, right? It can be very debilitating, these kinds of experiences, and we've all been through them. But people are more afraid now than ever of being vulnerable, of being open to another person, of experiencing that kind of pain. And it makes people afraid of relationships. Now, it's not all bad. Some things have gotten better. Some things about the relationships between men and women have gotten better. Men have had to become probably more sensitive and aware, and it's not completely a man's world anymore. Some things have gotten better. Also, if you're not straight, things have gotten a lot better. But in some ways, it's more difficult for young people, and I can understand that because of the harshness of the world that they're growing up in makes you much less open to the pain and the vulnerability of a relationship. And the swiping makes it so much harder to understand the social element in dealing with in a seduction. So.
For someone who's not in their 20s, that was so spot on. And I think you absolutely are the person to talk about this. That really resonated. And I think it resonates with a lot of people. What you mentioned about, the fear of rejection, which became way, way bigger than it used to be because dating apps basically removed, any kind of rejection. And then, what you mentioned about vulnerability and how it's required, and people nowadays, they don't have that openness anymore. Super fascinating. Something I hear all the time when it comes to dating advice is just be yourself, be authentic. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, it has some truth to it. I mean, as I mentioned before, with the game, the pickup artist game, that there's nothing less seductive than you read a book, you read Robert Greene's Art of Seduction, and you're applying these tactics to somebody, right? You're not being real, you're not being authentic, you're not being, so that's not seductive. On the other hand, if you're just who you are, then that's not going to work either. So if I want to date you and I just wear the kind of clothes that I wear in the house, like shorts and a t-shirt, and then I just take you to the pub where I, have my usual food and beer, that's not seductive. That's being who I am. That's what I normally would like. That's me. No. You dress nicely. You put some effort into it. All right, that's not how you normally would necessarily be. You take them to a place that you think is going to interest them, It isn't normally what you would do in your day-to-day life. You can't be completely yourself because there's no mystery involved. There's no interest. There's no spark going on. You have to create a little bit of mystery. The person can't know exactly who you are. If you just tell them everything about yourself and you just give them everything that you have on social media, they know everything about you. There's no need to be fascinated by it. The art of seduction, I can tell you very simply, is when I leave you, not after the podcast, but after, a date of some sort, and you're thinking about me, I have seduced you. Okay? To the degree that you're thinking about me and that I got inside of your head, I have seduced you. Okay? Okay, that skill, that ability to do that isn't necessarily authentic. It's not necessarily who I am. It's I understand. So it's like a dance. People in the world today are too black and white. They're too, I've got to be authentic, or I've got to learn how to use these tactics. It's both. You're being natural. You know that you're a rake. You know that you're a coquette, and you're bringing that out. But you also understand the psychology of other people and how you have to play to people's individuality and what will get under their skin and what will make them think about you the next day, right? So if you're a man who just loves to talk about himself and brag about all of your great achievements, you're being natural, you're being authentic, but you're also being a real turnoff. You're being a real anti-seducer. So learn some skills. Learn to shut up, for instance, and don't be so authentic, and learn how to control yourself a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I always thought about this, just be yourself. It's like, but what if being yourself, isn't enough to get someone?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's about learning some skills or unlearning some things, like you mentioned, and, overall bettering yourself as a person as well. Because I guess some people are naturally born, or not necessarily born, but they grew up in an environment where their parents taught them how to listen, for instance, or, they learned some skills. But what if you didn't, and then you lack the skills and you have all these anti-seductive qualities, like you only talk about yourself, then it's actually a good idea to not be yourself and to learn some skills and maybe not do some things. So yeah, super, super interesting take on it, because it's quite controversial as well to say, no, don't be yourself, don't be authentic. So, when it comes to people not being authentic and wearing masks, how can you actually, see through people's masks? Are there ways to kind of see through, these masks and read people?
Well, yes, it depends on the situation, but so, the people who are giving you individualized attention and seem to be interested in you, they have to have a quality that is social, that's pro-social, right? Of course, that can be faked. And there are psychopaths in this world, sociopaths, whatever you want to call them, who are good at listening only to gather information to manipulate with you and hurt you with. But you can usually pick that up in their body language, right? I tell people that with narcissists, I said this before, there's a kind of distance in their eyes. They're listening to you, they're talking to you, but there's a deadness there. It's not connecting. And, I'm saying something kind of strange here. I mean, eyes are what they are. Eyes are just eyes. But you can feel through the eyes something inside a person's soul. I'm sorry to say that. I'm sorry to use a word like soul, but you can. You can see in their eyes whether they have general interest in other people or they're only inside their own mind all of the time. You can see that there's something bitter about this. Envy is something you can read in people's eyes. I wrote about that in The Laws of Human Nature. There's this kind of fake look, and they seem to be interested in you, but the eyes, there's something going on where they're revealing their envy. And in the ancient world, they call it the evil eye. The evil eye was the eye of envy. You can sense that in people's eyes. They reveal so much. I had a chapter in The Laws of Human Nature that I think is important. It was about nonverbal communication. And this is all about nonverbal communication, but it's also about people's patterns of behavior. So if there is a woman, and I'm just saying woman because it could be a man, who has all this drama in her life, and she's always been the victim. There's always these terrible men that they've been involved with. They did this, that, the other. And it's also women. They're always bitter women who are jealous and who have hurt her. And she's had so much drama in her life. There's a pattern there. There's a pattern of what I called in 48 Laws of Power, infection, right? They are actually the ones who bring on all the bad things in their life because they love drama. They love having all this emotional bullshit around them, okay? So their actions can also, the people's past can reveal that you're dealing with an infecting type. They're too dramatic, okay? But oftentimes it's the body that reveals it. And you can see the way the relaxed quality in their body language. In a seduction setting, when people mirror each other, so if I move my arm this way, then the woman does that a few minutes later, unconsciously, she's falling under my spell, because my relaxed behavior is inducing a similar relaxed reaction in her. So to read people's masks, you have to shut off all your intellectual crap, all your verbalizing, all your thinking, and be attentive to the body. The body will tell you, because I could say anything with my words. I could say, you're so beautiful, I'm in love with you, you're just wonderful, and I'm lying. But I can't lie with my eyes, I can't lie with my mouth, I can't lie with my body language. It tells the truth. I can say I love you, but my eyes are just kind of dead, and it's just a form, and it's just words.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So following these micro expressions to sort of get a read on people. Okay, so this is my last question. What is the best advice that you would have for someone in their 20s versus someone in their 30s?
In your 20s, have fun. Don't be so heavy. Don't be so mono. I've got to make money. I've got to have a family. I've got to get married. I've got to do this, that, and the other. Have some explore, try things out, date a few people, try different jobs. Don't be in such a hurry, because to be honest with you, your 20s are your best, most exciting period of life. They were for me, and they go by quickly and they're gone. And then you're already in your 30s, your 40s, your middle age. It's gone. It's very quick. It's very short. I don't mean to just have fun, because I want you to be serious. I want you to learn things. I want you to develop skills. I want you to think a little bit about your future, definitely. So it's a little bit 50-50, maybe it's 60-40. But don't close yourself off to having an adventure, to exploring, to dating different people, to trying different jobs, to traveling a little bit, and to just soak up experience that you're going to use later in life. That's my advice to people in their 20s. At the same time, you want to be serious and build real skills that now when you turn 30 and life starts to slow down and you have to become more serious, not necessarily, but you usually do, you're ready. You had skills, you had experiences, you had adventures, you know about the world, and now you're ready to kick ass. You're ready to do something important. In your 30s, it's more like it's a turning point in your life. So when you turn 30, it's like a switch is going on. It's sort of silly because it's just a word. I mean, days and years don't actually exist. They're just words. So we just say the word 30, but it often happens. It happened when I turned 30, that you start thinking a little more seriously about where you're going, about who you are, about where your life is. Okay? And that's where that element of the life's task that I mentioned earlier is so important. You have a solid sense of who you are, of what you want in your life. And now's the time to get it, because when you're 30, 31, 32, that's your most creative part. That's when you're your most powerful. For me, it was when I was 38, 39, so it's not the same for everybody. But it's the time to get a little more serious with your life and to reassess and to understand, I had these adventures, I developed these skills, and now I'm going to bring it all together, and I'm going to be a great podcaster. I'm going to write books. I'm going to win elections. I'm going to change the world. I'm going to organize this kind of social thing going on. That's would be my advice to people in their 20s and 30s. When you begin a project, when you enter into a relationship, when you enter into any kind of business environment, the way you begin, the way you would present yourself, if it's bold, if you're confident, if you think this project is going to be extremely successful, it's going to do well, it infects other people. They get drawn into it. And because you appear confident, it makes it seem that you know what you're doing, that you have that competence that you mentioned, right? But we've all experienced this. If you're around somebody who's timid, who's insecure, who's anxious in a social situation, it makes you timid and anxious, right? But if you're around somebody powerful, you get caught up in it. So having that kind of boldness, people are in this world today, particularly now in 2026, people are too timid. They're so afraid. They're so afraid of being different from other people. They're so cowardly, right? They want to fit in. And I'm telling you, your boldness, you're not afraid to be different, you're not afraid to take risks, is what will translate into power. That's a very, very important one. And there are others. It depends on the circumstances. So I have a law, I can't remember the exact title. It's about creating dependence. So if you're trying to have some power in this world, if you have a skill that nobody else has, if you have an ability that makes you different and unique, then you have power because you can't be replaced. But if you're working in an office or in some environment like that, and you're just like everybody else, you don't have that kind of irreplaceable quality, when you reach the age of 28, 29, or 30, they're going to find somebody younger who they can pay less to replace you. So not being replaceable, making it that people depend on you, you're the only person that can get something done, is an extremely, extremely powerful position to be in. Of course, the question is, how do you get into that position? And that's what I talk about in the chapter. So you have to kind of read that chapter, and I explain how you can accomplish that.
Can I ask you, how can you accomplish that?
Well, there are several ways you do that. So you have to think, first of all, in this particular business that you're in, whatever it is, right? What is that skill that I can do that nobody else can do, right? Okay, so there are going to be other people around you, and you're all going to basically have the same kind of training, the same background that makes you kind of similar, right? What is it that can make you stand out? What is the thing that you have, the skill, the power, the quality? It can be personal, it could be technical, that is different from everybody else. And then you lean on that skill and you make it very strong. And you make it clear to the people working in your business or wherever you are that to get rid of you is going to be very, very costly. Okay? So it depends on the job that you're in. I can't say a general strategy that'll work everywhere, but just focus on this one thing. If they want to fire me, they're going to pay a terrible price because they won't find anybody else that'll be able to do what I can do. So you need to find those things that you can do that nobody else can do, that they're not going to, then it's going to be very very impactful and very painful for them to fire you, whatever that will be in your particular situation. Also, having a lot of allies within your company. So you have, you just don't rely on one person in the business. You just don't have like a boss who supports you. You have, in the different departments or different areas of your job, you have 3 or 4 people that like you, that are allied with you. And so to get rid of you is also going to cause friction in the company, and a lot of other people are going to be upset. I mean, Francesca, I could go into dozens of strategies on that, but that should give you a kind of idea. But I recommend reading that chapter.
Yeah, absolutely. And I encourage my listeners also to do that. And you mentioned before, that especially in today's day and age, 2026, people are more timid. I wanted to ask you, why is that?
Well, I don't mean to judge it so much, because there are reasons for these things. And, and I didn't grow up in this world that, in the internet age. I'm much older than that. So if I grow up now, if I had been born in the 90s or the 2000s, I would probably be the same as other people. It's very understandable. But a lot of it has to do with social media, to be quite frank. I mean, there are many causes for it, so I don't mean to make it simple, but one of the main causes is social media, because you become so hyper aware of what other people are doing around you, right? And you're so afraid of being different. You're feeling like if you're different from the group, people are going to judge you, because you're so aware of what everybody else is doing. Back when I was growing up, only my friends knew what I was up to, and I only had interactions with them, right? And so to be different, when I was growing up, to be a nonconformist was a lot easier and less painful. But nowadays, you want to fit in. You want to have the same tastes as other people. You want to have, you're all interested in the same memes. You focus on the same things on social media. And it gives incredible pressure for you to conform and to be like other people. And to be different, it seems painful, seems, something you don't want. The other thing is, this world has become much more chaotic and difficult than it was in my day, right? There were so many things that have intervened in the last 15, 20 years that can make people very timid and very conservative. So you had the crash in 2008, then you had COVID, right? And then you have all the disturbances, the financial things that are going on these days. It's a very, very chaotic, difficult world that people, particularly who are young, are having to navigate. And it's very stressful, and it's very dangerous. So you naturally, when humans are faced with chaotic situations, they become conservative. They want to try and control everything. And so there's a lot less openness to being different, to being a nonconformist. But I tell people, so I wrote a book called Mastery. I don't know if you're familiar with the book Mastery.
Yeah.
But the source of your power in life, I don't care who you are or wherever you grew up or how old you are, the source of your power is being different from other people. It's your uniqueness. If you look at people in music or in film or in politics that are powerful, there is nobody else like them. They are unique. They're one of a kind. And you, every single person out there in your audience has that quality. You all have something unique about who you are. And when you lean into that, when you're strong on that, you're going to stand out from others and you're going to be powerful. But if you're so afraid and you're so wanting to be like other people and you're so worried about people's judgments and criticisms, then you're going to have it's going to be very tough for you in life.
Absolutely. That makes so much sense. And I actually wanted to ask you, how do you go about finding that uniqueness and that source of power within? Do you have any practical strategies?
Well, you're asking all the tough questions. I could
Sorry.
spend like hours trying to answer that. It's all right. It's all right. Well, in Mastery, I have a chapter on that. The first chapter. It's called Discover Your Life's Task. And I don't mean to brag or anything, but to me, it's the most important thing I've ever written. Because if you don't understand who you are as an individual, of what makes you unique, of what could possibly be the source of your success in life, you're going to have a very hard time, right? So you have to know who you are. You have to figure out the puzzle that you represent, okay? So the image that I try and tell people is your DNA that you have as an individual is unique. It's not like anybody else in the past, in the present, or in the future. Okay, so you are marked right there as an individual. You are completely unique the way your brain is wired, all right? And then you have your parents who are also have their own uniqueness, and they raised you. And so you're raised like nobody else in the world. And then you have friends and experiences when you're 3, 4, 5 years old that are unlike experiences of anybody else. All of that stamps you as somebody completely different, completely unique, okay? And when you're a child, when you're 3 years old, 4 years old, you kind of have a sense of that. You don't have to, it's not about words or anything that you can naturally think. It's an inclination, it's an impulse, it's an intuition. I'm attracted to sports. I'm attracted to physical activity. I like patterns and music. I'm interested in words and language. I like to fix things. I'm good with my hands. I have mechanical skills. I'm really good with people. I have social skills. There's something when you're very young that you're attracted to that makes that is very powerful, right? It has nothing to do with thinking or words. It's something pre-verbal. You're drawn to it, okay? And then when you get older, you stop hearing that voice. You lose contact with what makes you so different. And you start listening to other people. You listen to your parents who tell you need to get a job and make a lot of money. You listen to your friends who tell you what's cool. You listen to teachers. You listen to bosses. And you lose complete contact with that source of what makes you different from everybody else. And in Mastery, I talk about all these very successful, famous people, some of whom I interviewed for the book. And in each case, you can go back to that moment when they were 4 or 5 years old, and something happened where they go, wow, I'm so excited by this, right? It could be Martha Graham, the great dancer, the great choreographer, and how she just got entranced by physical movement when she was like 8 years old. Or Steve Jobs passing by a window where there were all these electronic things in there, and he's going, wow, how beautiful it is. I'd love to design those things, right? Or Albert Einstein getting a compass when he was 4 years old and marveling at the fact that something invisible was moving the needle on the compass. When you're a child, these things are very obvious. You're so drawn to them. You have to go back and you have to figure out what it is that you are so excited about that had that kind of power over you when you were very young. It's very complicated, Francesca. So if you're 19, it's very easy and much easier to go through this process. And it's very important that you do. By the time you're 30 and you haven't thought about it, it gets harder. If you're 40 or 50, it's almost too late. So it's better to begin figuring this out, figuring out who you are, figuring out what you love and what you're excited about. You know, if you love something, if you're interested in a subject, you learn and you absorb information much more quickly, much faster, right? Than if you decide to become a lawyer because your parents tell you that that's how you can make a lot of money, but you're not really interested, you're not really engaged. You're not going to learn at such a fast rate that, as opposed to, wow, I love music and this absorbs me. You're going to learn quickly. You're going to learn in 2 years what would take somebody 5 or 6 years to learn because they're not interested in it. So it's extremely important process to go through. And a lot of people come to me with this problem. They go, Robert, I can't figure out what my life's task is. And we have to go through a process that I could explain. That's quite involved. but it's a matter of digging into your past and digging into who you are and to the kinds of things that you love and the kinds of things that you hate. I don't know if that answers your question. I went kind of long into the
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a fascinating topic. I'd love to learn more about it. I think, what you mentioned about, going back to your childhood is so, so valuable. And it's true for me as well. And
Well, tell me about yourself. What was that about yourself?
well, first of all, I really liked asking questions. I've always been really curious and really fascinated by human psychology. And, I thought, okay, maybe I'll be a psychologist then, maybe I'll go down that path. But that was too limiting for me. And it wasn't using other skills because I also liked being on stage and acting. And so I kind of found this perfect path for myself where all these things that I like to do were combined. Because now I'm like a psychology content creator and I have a podcast and I'm like, I'm kind of acting on stage, but also, interviewing people like yourself, and it kind of tied in really beautifully.
When did that all start to come together for you? When were you able? Did you go through some moments where you weren't so keyed in on this kind of thing? I mean, when did it happen for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for most of my life, I didn't know what my career path would look like. I guess kids nowadays, they know they want to be an influencer or YouTuber. But, when I was younger, it was still like the more traditional roles. Like, okay, you could work in marketing. It's not just doctor or lawyer, but, you still have to kind of choose a career path. And it wasn't until maybe I was 18, 19 that, I found out like, okay, there's actually alternatives and you can make money from these things and that could be a career path. So it's super fascinating. I want to know also about you. Like, when did you discover, this passion for writing and everything you do now?
Well, it's when I was probably about 8 years old or so, or even younger. I had this thing about words. I thought words were kind of like magic, and just the sound of words. I'm very a person that's very into the sounds of things, and I love hearing language. And when I write something, I'm always hearing it in my head first. And so words kind of obsessed me at a very early age. And then when I was about 8 years old, I started, we got this thing in school where you could, they gave you a pamphlet and you could buy these books. If you put a little check by them, and there would be like, hundreds of book titles in there. They were for children, books for children. And I remember I ticked off about 80 of these books. My parents got really upset because 80 books were delivered. They had to pay for it. But I got so into reading. Suddenly reading became like this magical world. I mean, think of it. I tell people, reading a book, if you think about what it is like magic. It is like a total process of enchantment. You're entering into the mind of another person who's weaving this, if it's fiction, weaving this imaginary world. And for a child, for me, it was like I was so in love with this. I wanted to be a writer. And then, like you, I couldn't figure out where exactly my writing would fit, right? It wasn't in journalism that I tried. I tried writing novels that didn't work. I got into Hollywood. I tried writing screenplays that didn't work. And then suddenly it clicked with writing a nonfiction book, with giving the chance to write the 48 Laws of Power. And then everything came together just like it did for you in podcasting. But the main thing is I never gave up. I had a lot of pain. I didn't have success until I was almost 40 years old. And so, but I never gave up. I knew that this is what I was meant to do. I knew that I was different from other people in this one thing. And so I never had doubts. I just kept trying and trying and trying and trying.
That's incredibly inspiring. And I think a lot of people, they're in their 30s or 40s and they feel lost and they feel like I should have already found that thing or my
Yeah.
path and they haven't, and they feel maybe like failures. And, it's so inspiring to hear a story like yours and know that no, you don't have to be in your 20s or 15 to find your life path. You could be 40, you could be 50, you could be much
Yeah.
older than that. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, well, like you, I had many different sides to my personality. I also liked kind of acting and performing and being out in public and stuff. I had many different interests. I liked fiction, I liked stories, but I also liked history. How can you possibly put all that together into one skill, into making money and having a living in life? That was the puzzle I couldn't solve. And finally, I solved it